pandemic.
The reason why The Shield came to be was that I spent 3 years working on Nash Bridges, a phenomenal writing staff, phenomenal mentors in Carlton Cuse and John Worth, who really took their time trying to teach me what I was doing right and what I was doing wrong. But there was a formula to that show. And there was very much, in many ways, because of Don Johnson, our star, who wanted to be viewed very heroically, and he had a lot of clout on the show. There were narrow parameters, which, writing for that show for 3 years, I started to buck against. I started to resist. Now, I couldn't resist it on Nash Bridges. Right? And so what I found was I had this idea for the show that turned out to be The Shield. And I was like, I'm just going to get everything. And I'd gone on police ride-alongs and up in San Francisco for the show and had seen things that, I thought were really super interesting, but were wholly inappropriate for Nash Bridges. And I was like, let me just get it all out in this one script. And then, of course, no one will ever make this show because the only people that make shows like this are HBO, and they produce their own stuff. So this will never get made, but hopefully it's a good writing sample. And after 3 years of writing Nash as the hero 100% of the time, let me write this guy who's kind of heroic, but also an asshole, and you kind of love him, but you kind of hate him. And I never imagined The Shield, especially the pilot, I would say, is a far darker show than I am as a person. And I did it as a one-time thing to get it out of the way, to just cleanse my palate from Nash. And I'd started to work on Angel for Joss Whedon at that point, because I started writing the pilot while I was still on Nash and sort of finished it when I had started on Angel. But all of a sudden FX wanted to make it, and all of a sudden it became my life for 7 years. And it was interesting because I'm a far happier, more optimistic person than I think that show suggests. And at the beginning, it was hard to believe. Like, when I first got a call about this meeting, I was like, FX, you mean Fox? Like, no, FX. I was like, yeah, I get that cable show. That's like Beverly Hills 90210 repeats. Like, what are you talking about? They were speaking another language. Like, they don't make TV shows. What are you talking about? And I had to be convinced that, just go and meet with them and talk with them. And I met with Kevin Riley and Peter Igori there, and they kind of explained what they were doing. I was like, well, that sounds amazing. That will never work, but okay. Who's going to watch shows on FX? It just made no sense.
Right.
But I was so early in my career and so low on the totem pole that if somebody says, hey, we want to make your show, you're just so excited to make it. Once again, it was like, well, if we can do a good job, of course they'll never make it. And if they make it, no one will ever watch it. But if it's sort of good, maybe that could be a calling card for my next gig. And it wasn't until after season 1 premiered and got good ratings, great reviews, that I was like, oh my God, this might be my life for a few years, which was surprising. But it was surreal. It was utterly unexpected. It didn't match up with how everyone understood the industry to work. There were people there at FX, and and I've heard stories after the fact about, I wouldn't say resistant, but how skeptical management at News Corp was about this. But they gave Peter and Kevin the rope to hang themselves, and then it worked. And I think there were a lot of people that were shocked, and I give them a lot of credit. And listen, I love getting some of the credit for being the creator of The Shield, but they followed that up with Nip Tuck and then Rescue Me. And so they're very smart about what they were doing. And there was a niche. I always say to writers, write the show that's not on TV that you want to watch. And these guys programmed the shows that weren't on TV that they wanted to watch. And there was a gap between these prestige HBO shows that were only on a few months out of the year, and network TV at that point. And between subscription, channels like HBO and ad-supported networks. And they, Peter Igori once told me the story that when he went to present this pilot to advertisers in New York and advertiser buyers, that before they ran the pilot for everyone to watch, that he said, listen, before you watch the show, I just want you to ask yourself one question. So this would have been in 2001. and The Sopranos, I think, was in its second or third season at this point. He goes, if you could buy ads on The Sopranos, would you? And then he rolled the pilot of The Shield. So there was this niche that was being unserved, that they were smart enough to notice, and they had found my script and thought it might work for them. But my life changed so dramatically, so quickly. It was crazy. It was nuts. And I still have a hard time believing it, because all I wanted to be was a working writer. I didn't want to be a guy that, of course I wanted to be, but I didn't imagine myself being a guy who was like changing the face of television with his show, or a guy that would get up at the Golden Globe Awards to accept, the trophy for best drama. That just was like incomprehensible to me. And it's still hard to believe, because I just wanted to be a working guy. I just wanted to be a guy who could go to work and write things. When I wrote my first episode of Nash Bridges, it premiered on Halloween night, 1997. And I was just like, oh my God, like there's my name on CBS as writing the episode. I thought that was a pinnacle. I didn't think it got better than that. And so as it got better, it's that broadcast news line where Holly Hunter, says, what do you, or no, it's William Hurt says, what do you do when your reality sort of eclipses your dreams, or something like that? And she says, keep it to yourself. I was just like, oh, gotta keep it to myself. It's just hard to believe.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that feeling from your perspective. I just knew it as an outside viewer. And I think about now how so many people coming up take for granted that they can write those kinds of things that are edgier and that push more boundaries. And I think that there's a wider range of ideas that people feel like they can do now. But still, even people who've been on here who have come up more recently, over and over again, there's some version of this story of something that had built up inside them that they just desperately wanted to tell this story, that didn't necessarily make any sense to the industry as it existed, and didn't make sense necessarily to their reps or whoever. And then they went and they wrote it, and that was the thing that precipitated the next great launch.
Yeah, Mad Men's a great example of that. HBO passed on the script for Mad Men. Even though Matt had been a writer on The Sopranos, here's the script. But what's a show about, advertising guys in the 1960s? It's nuts. So yeah, there are all these examples, and I actually worry a lot about the business, because I think the TV business is starting to become more like film, and film. The film business is essentially, other than big Marvel movies, has essentially destroyed itself over the last 20 years. And now we're applying their methods more. And so many of these projects are starting off with, well, we have this book and this star and this director, and the sixth person being brought on is the showrunner. Mm-hmm. We're going to put all this together, and then we're going to bring somebody in. And I feel like the batting average for those things is so low. When I look back and think about the shows that were seminal in the last 20 years, the vast majority of them, maybe like Game of Thrones is an exception because it was based on the novels, but the vast examples of this, whether it's prestige cable like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad and The Shield and Mad Men, or whether it's network like Grey's Anatomy. Grey's Anatomy was a passion thing that Shonda Rhimes had. That was a story she had to tell. Matt Weiner had to tell the story of Mad Men. To me, that's the road to success in TV, is to have somebody who has an idea that nobody's had before, that they just have to tell. And if properly supported and properly cast and properly produced, those are the shows that become special in my estimation.
Thanks for checking out Pandemic, brought to you by Roadmap Writers and Notes for Execs. I'm Joel Silberman, and if you're interested in more intimate interviews with writers on writing, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share. Thanks very much. Stay safe.